are there any religious laws that are absolutely true and necessary and which transcend the bounds of time, place, and culture?
Love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, all thy mind, and all thy strength.
That's a good one, but it's sort of like a commandment, so I guess it's a law.
It's the only thing that came to mind.
Well, you know, there are a lot of laws that are based on principles that might endure, you know, across the bounds of time. But a law usually is applied to a, you know, particular world or situation or something. So it's hard to, I don't know. You know, religious laws, I guess, are usually assumed to be universal and fundamental and everything, but it doesn't always work out that way.
The one thing I was going to say, I think it all depends on principle, and I think that's the problem with religious laws, is that most of the time people don't take into account intention. And, you know, just look to some of the big ones even. Don't use God's name in vain. Well, yeah. I think God's name in vain is one of the greatest things you can do. If you're having God's name on your mouth at all times, even when you're swearing at someone, hallelujah, because you know you've got God on your tongue, the name of God on your tongue.
The more he blasphemes, the more he praises God.
Yeah, I mean, the name, and I'm not just saying from the Islamic tradition, and the name in every tradition has a certain mystical significance that sometimes you might just be saying whatever, using it in a very day-to-day manner, not really intending it to have religious significance, and yet the name might draw you towards itself.
Well, and not only that, but the fact that you're making a reference to something holy at least acknowledges that there's some special thing about it, that it confers something on the situation that wouldn't be there otherwise. It's like the difference between saying, why are you doing that? And Jesus Christ, you know, you bring that extra dimension into the moment, at least even if unintentionally. Because now most discourse has no place for those kinds of references. People used to throw around the names of the saints and the Holy Family and all that kind of stuff as intensifiers in their language. And it also, if you swear using the names of a lot of saints, at least you know something about the saints. So I don't think we do it as much as we used to, because we have other cruder four-letter words and things to use.
Yes, and there's also something about one doesn't have to reach so far as a divine quality, because there's so many other strong statements, words available.
Off the shelf, yeah.
I mean, also, what's the one law that every tradition has? Don't kill. But what if there's someone that has a gun and is threatening to kill a group full of hostages, and you, a good religious person, are a sniper, and you have a chance to kill one person and save 100?
Yeah. Only the really fundamental things come close to absolute. Loving your neighbor, loving God, living according to love, those kinds of things. Those are pretty universal. But that's why I made the distinction between principles and laws, because we've got lots of laws.
Mm-hmm.
They haven't helped us much. Not to mention that every time you mention a law, you're making somebody a religious law. You're making somebody an apostate or a heretic or something like that. Kind of like every time they criminalize some behavior, they create criminals overnight.
Right.
And Islam and Judaism have a big problem with that, I think, more than most religions.
Judaism's got tons of laws, and they're all contingent practically. But they can be taken as absolute and off and on.
Well, why is it Islam and Judaism? Where's Christianity here? The other Middle Eastern monotheism.
I didn't mention Christianity because I believe Christianity, as such, shouldn't be putting an emphasis on law. Just certain idiotic Christians do.
You're right. I agree that Christianity is less bound to such things, at least by its nature. And there may be something about the absolute being stronger than the immanent in the other two that tempts one to be sort of absolutist about things. I mean, religion was really softened up and made warm and attractive in Christianity, and so much of the other two have to do with behavior. They have to do with virtue too, but often they don't make the distinction between the behavior and the virtue.
I also always found it strange that the Quran spends so many pages going into, very, in my view, unimportant laws, and, dozens of pages detailing very, very fine measures of inheritance and such.
Yeah.
And yet it doesn't even say how to pray. It says pray in the morning, noon, at night, basically. And I always found that interesting. It's like there are very few instructions for that which should be important, and a lot of instructions about that which shouldn't be important. And it almost makes me think, maybe those things that were set down in a very detailed manner specifically aren't important. Okay, they're time bound. They're for a specific time and place, but because prayer is not meant for a specific time and place, it's not given in such a detailed manner so that people can adapt their mode of prayer within a certain framework as times and places change.
Yeah, and higher principles don't need endless elaboration. I mean, there's no end of opportunities to apply them, but that's different. I mean, how much can you say about, how many laws can you make about love, It's something that can't be compulsive, or exactly. No compulsion in love.
Well, in many ways, laws in Christianity are more, I guess, clearer, or it's clear they exist because wasn't it Augustine who made all of Roman law what the church calls canon law?
I mean,
really?
What was that, Augustine?
I mean, but that's just Catholicism.
Yeah, well, that spoke for Christianity for a long time.
That's right. It already departed from its source, noticeably by then. But
I mean, just in my perspective, not to say that it's perfect or anything, because it's far from it, but I would just say in a lot of respects, particularly in the respect of how they view laws, I would say the Orthodox come closest to the intention of the Bible.
I agree.
Yes, that certainly makes sense.
That's been my experience. Like, in conversation with Orthodox priests and such.
In fact, the Orthodox view even says that the Bible is meant as principles in action that are meant to be viewed as, a direction for a way of life in Christ, but that the Bible is not what's sacred, but that the church is what's sacred, and the church is supposed to adapt and change over time.
Well, yes. And as soon as you absolutize the book, you've limited your flexibility. I mean, it's clear in Christianity that the message of Christianity is Jesus Christ. It's not this book. And so, all the people that are sola scriptura and the Bible is the literal word of God, they're just idolaters.
There was a hilarious article I read a while back, which was saying basically the same point, and it's saying that's why, Orthodox and Catholic people are fine with having an ugly Bible, and Protestants want to spend a lot of money, let's say, on a really nice Bible, because for them, it's all about the printed word on the page. And that's really missing the forest for the trees. Yeah.
And it's all about their open attachment to this Bible idol. They want to show people their beautiful Bible and stuff like that, as if it enhances them in some way. Yeah, the Bible has become a millstone around the neck for Christianity, for many so-called Christians.
And why is that?
Because if you lean in the literal direction, you bind yourself. There's no
right.
Yeah. There's no fluidity.
And this is why, essentially, what at first was a revolutionary progressive movement in the form of Protestantism ended up creating offshoots that are really far more conservative than the more traditional churches. Because it essentially what you have here is, in the other churches, for better or worse, you had in Catholicism gatekeepers, and in Orthodoxy at least, a certain set process of instruction. Whereas in Protestantism, you're expected to basically go and understand the Bible yourself and interpret it for yourself. And
I know.
it's dangerous.
Yeah. I mean, once you get to is salvation by faith or works and sola scriptura, you've just killed the spirit practically. I think the Orthodox have done the best job of preserving the spirit. Everybody else just talks about it.
Yeah. Understood. Yes.
And sort of building on that or related to it, is there a natural law? And if so, what is it? And I think that's a good question to ask, because Sheikh Bashir, you mentioned Augustine, and a lot of what he set in place as law was based on what would be considered natural law.
Tell us more about that.
Well, I mean, the root basis of natural law comes from certain writings of Aristotle, but essentially what it's saying is that, and it's a good principle, saying that which is law should be based on nature. If it's natural, then it's good. If it's not natural, it's not. But the problem is, and that's all good and everything, but the problem is certain people in certain times and places see things through the lenses of their socialization, the way they were raised, their language, their culture.
Right.
So what appears to be natural to them might not be natural to someone else. Let's go back to the whole thing of heterosexuality, homosexuality. For Augustine, that would be something that, anything other than, lifelong marriage is unnatural. On the other hand, go back in time 1,000 years, and the early Mycenaean Greeks would have said, that's ridiculous. Plato in his Symposium built an entire myth around the fact that, there's not one sexuality, essentially. it's all basically natural. And I'm not arguing for or against one or the other. I'm just saying earlier and later cultures have said different things. So what is it that's natural? I mean, it's sometimes hard to really come to terms with it once you realize many things are actually conditioned based on the way you look at it.
Right. I think if you live in nature more, then you're likely to make a good choice about what's natural. But, we don't so much anymore. Also, if you go back 1,000 years or so in Christianity, marriage was not a sacrament.
Yes, that's right.
That came along later. It wasn't originally a sacrament. The Eucharist is the sacrament, after all.
Yes, it was early Middle Ages that marriage became a sacrament.
Yeah, I don't remember when it was that the church felt they had to say something about it. But I just know it wasn't there, and then it was.
I mean, if we're speaking about natural law, considering that, whether or not you believe in evolution, humans are probably most closely related to primates. Well, primates are probably some of the least monogamous creatures on the planet. I mean, sure, you have monogamous animals, lifelong monogamy among penguins in Antarctica, but not among primates. And so, is it a good thing? It can be a good thing. It can also be a bad thing. The number of lives ruined because they felt they had to stay with the same person for too long.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Let's see. History. Early period. Early period, this is Wikipedia. Marriage was considered a necessary passage into adulthood. Well, that's kind of, if that's normally what happens, then you would probably see it that way. At the same time, some in the emerging Christian communities began to prize the celibate state higher than marriage.
This is interesting.
Yeah, they did, of course, because supposedly Jesus didn't have anything to do with that kind of thing. Although I don't know how you go from the doctrine of fully God and fully man, flying to Jesus Christ, and leave out a fundamental aspect of fully man.
And, it's heretical, but I think that's an important thing to say. I think sometimes you have to look at what's not written in the Bible, and that's something that Lawrence talks about. It's also something that the great Greek author Nikos Kazantzakis writes about. Whether or not Jesus consummated any relationships, he believed that he probably struggled with it because he was fully man. And if he struggled with it, like all monks, unless that monk isn't monks and nuns, unless that monk or nun is some sort of aberration, they all struggle with celibacy.
Absolutely. They're going to feel attractions to people. And it may be friendship and it may be lust.
And it's funny because so often in the literature it's portrayed as if, actually, it tends to be more recent. Post-Renaissance, the literature of the monastics, it's portraying it almost as if a person comes in, takes their vows, and suddenly the lust disappears.
Yeah, good luck with that.
But whereas the earlier period, of the Desert Fathers or, the so-called Dark Ages, you actually have entire manuals written about how this is natural and how to combat it and live with it and everything else.
Yeah, I mean, it can be considered as listening to the devil, or it can be considered as, a temptation in a much more benign sense, that meaning that you have to consciously confront it and, decide what you're going to do. But there's nothing wrong with temptation. We swim in them.
Yes.
it's our attitude toward them, and yeah,
One cannot not have them.
yeah, I can't imagine it.
And, when things are certain things that are essential parts of our nature are taken to extreme, such as the extreme on the one hand of celibacy, or on the other extreme, some of the tantric practices of the Tibetan Buddhists or the Kashmir Shaivites. Essentially, it's the circle going around and completing itself, because despite the fact that they're taking opposite roads, they both meet at the same place.
Yeah, and in a certain sense, they depart from the same point.
Right, exactly. It's the same. Psychical center within the body that they're working with, despite the fact that their practice is wildly different.
Right. I also suspect that the emphasis on marriage and monogamy derives from the idealization of the monastic. And that if you can't be a monastic, then at least you can stay within the bounds of a single marriage. That it's second best, but still good.
That seems sad to me.
It is, well, yeah. I mean, it works for a lot of people, but it's just an oversimplification. But people like that. People need simple things.
Yes, often true.
Changing the subject, my dog's only 11 weeks old, but she must have a Sufi sheikh, since she lives in the here and now and experiences a constant sense of wonder and awareness at all creation. Why is that so hard for us?
Yeah, good question. Because we used to have it. But presumably we still do, but it's covered up with crusty stuff. I can certainly remember experiencing wonder frequently when I was very, very small. My earliest memories are just
say again.
Wonder-filled, if not wonderful, wonder-filled. And I think that my earliest memory is like from maybe a year and a half old, or something like that.
Well, I certainly can relate to the dog.
Yes. Well, and that's what I like about cats too.
Oh, clearly. Clearly.
But animals are naturally what they are. Talk about natural law. And so that nourishes him, and I can see why. I mean, he's got a relationship with these animals. I mean, he can go out and feed them by hand, but he says that if he's not peaceful inside, if he's distracted, then when he opens the door or steps out, they get stiff and take off. Which makes perfect sense.
Lawrence talks about this a lot as well. He says, the lion is perfect and complete in being a lion. The lamb is perfect and complete in being a lamb, and so on throughout all of creation. Why can't we be perfect and complete in being humans? Why do we always have to be something else?
Yeah. I think we do. As if we could be something else.
What is this about wanting to be something else?
I think a lot of people just aren't secure in their humanity. Maybe most people don't even know what it is to be human any longer.
No, I don't think they maybe never did. Because we live from a lot of ideas and assumptions and reflexes and things like that. And we don't, we're not always in touch with our humanity, which should flow naturally, instead of being, jerky reaction things that go on around us.
There's that old film, The Gods Must Be Crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that shows does a good job of showing what humans should be, what they were originally. I mean, I think I'm not trying to idealize a past period. I'm just saying, you know, when you are in touch with nature and in touch with the people and communities around you, and when you live in the here and now and have a sense of the sacred, then you're in touch with things. And when you're in touch with things, great things happen. And I just think we've lost a sense of the cosmos.
Yeah, and simplicity.
And simplicity. I mean, something so simple as the cycles of the moon and the rising and setting of the sun were true miracles for most people throughout history. And it doesn't matter that we call the moon a ball of rock and the sun a ball of gas.
Yeah.
They can be for us what they once were if we open up our third eye.
Yeah.
Yes,
There's something about that which makes you not simple being extraneous that is not as fundamental.
You know, the funny thing is I can actually pinpoint the day that the wonder started to die in me. It was my first day of kindergarten.
Huh. Well, that makes a certain sense.
You know, schools are institutions for the banishment of wonder.
Well, yes.
But anyway, to get back to the question is, why is it so hard to us? Is it so hard to us because society makes it hard for us, or the way we're socialized makes it hard for us? Or is there a certain hardness in our hearts? I mean, what is it? Because you're born, and up to a certain point, you live the same way and have that same presence in the here and now and same wonder that, you know, an idealized medicine man from pre-European the Americas would have had. But yet reclaiming that sense of wonder now that we know it can be reclaimed and it should be reclaiming it is one of the hardest things to do.
Well, yeah. I mean, there, in a certain sense, there isn't anything to claim. There's just stuff to drop, to find it again. But it's all the things we think we've learned that explain everything that happens around us before we even get a chance to reflect on it.
Good point. Yes, that happens before we have a chance to reflect.
Yeah, it's being encrusted with the past. Because that's where all our unnatural behavior comes from things we think we know.
Yes, indeed.
Interestingly enough, I was having an extended discussion about this with Sidi Izzadeen a couple months back, talking about how, you know, for some people, and not that long ago, one of the greatest ways to reclaim a sense of wonder was traveling.
Yeah.
Right, yes, certainly.
Yes, but for many people now, it's the opposite. I mean, how many times I've heard someone say, oh, I watched so many shows about that place, and then I went there in person, and it was such a disappointment.
That means they really didn't see it.
Yeah.
Or they were looking for the drama.
I suppose so. Maybe it's just you've got so much of this hyper-real presentation of reality through more real than real through video games, movies, television, and people expect something real to be hyper-real, and it's not. It's just real, which is good, but you need to know what you're expecting.
Right.
You need to see the imperfection within perfection and know that it's the imperfection that makes perfection perfect.
Yeah, and also that there is no pure imperfection. There's always some aspect of the perfect in this.
I mean,
Fragment.
that's one of the mysteries and miracles of creation, is that the one, the unified God, perfect and alone, allowed himself to emanate into imperfection in order that multiplicity should know perfection. If
Yeah.
any of that makes sense, because this is a bit like theologically minded and I'm still working at
Yeah.
2%.
Yes, exactly. I mean, it's like the expansion into the universe, in a sense, not only manifests it, but saves it. There's something about it being known divinely that is its salvation, or the salvation of the world, and even the cooling over of the fires of hell. Everything has to somehow be reintegrated into the one, in some way or at some point. But in the meantime, it's our job to do that with our own lives, or in our own lives.
Yes, fair enough.
I recently, in one of the sections of my book, was writing about these matters, and I was saying the idea of hell as being hot is false. It's a misnomer. Hell, if you want to speak in terms of alchemical symbolisms, is cold.
Yeah.
It's distance from the real, and the real is symbolized as a fire, which is hot. So essentially, it's heaven that burns you up and burns you alive. And right. So
the outer darkness doesn't have any fire.
Right.
Right. Exactly.
Well, and let's see. I think there have been cultures that thought of hell as being cold. Was that the Eskimos, or was that?
Oh, there's something about that, yes.
Yeah, it seems strange because they would sort of be living in hell most of their lives. But anyway, I've heard something about that. And it always makes sense to me that, you know, I mean, the emphasis is on suffering when you talk about fire.
Right.
But it's about deprivation when you talk about the outer darkness.
And, you know, that whole narrative about suffering, it's not helpful. If it was ever helpful, it's not helpful now. As you said, it's about deprivation. You're either close to the divine or you're separated from the divine. And for me, you know, the concept of a middle world or purgatory is something like those that wanted to be close to the divine, but for whatever reason weren't, you know, able at that moment. Hell is almost like willing separation from the divine, you know?
Yes. Yeah, I think there's some truth to the fact that the only people in hell are the ones that prefer to be there. Yeah,
and actually, there was a old Russian theologian I was reading recently, and he was saying just this. He said, no one is trapped in hell. All are saved if they want to be.
Yes. I like that.
If they want to be.
And you know, it was interesting too, because he was saying, you know, most of the time, you know, the souls that are trapped, it's because they are reliving the past or thinking about the future. They're either dwelling on the mistakes they made, or they're dreaming about heaven rather than living here and now. And even in hell, you can live in here and now. And that's the way to paradise. Right. And this was written, by the way, in, I think, around the year 1300. And I thought, wow, I have to bring this up because I think you two will like it.
I'm so glad you did. Yes, indeed.
Yeah, just like the presence of God, you know, salvation is there if you just allow it.
It is here.
Yeah. you know, and we maintain the walls of our prison.
Right.
Let them crumble.